What is going on, guys? My name is Lextasy. Welcome back to another episode, and this one honestly is extremely sad and hard to make. As a big car enthusiast and a car guy that loves driving different vehicles and owned over 70 different ones in my lifetime, I have to say those 20 or 30 minutes that I spend in the car driving to work or wherever else I'm going are like the most fun part of my day. And when it comes to cars that we enjoy, it's not just about the engine and the power and the performance of them. It also has to do with the transmissions and how it shifts, and I honestly love the manual transmissions. There is both pros and cons to both sides of the automatic transmission versus a manual transmission, and in this episode we're going to talk about what makes them both fun and why they are disappearing, unfortunately, faster than anybody ever expected them to. Let's take a quick minute and talk about my 2013 Audi S4. Now this right here is not a Hellcat killer, right? It doesn't have 1,000 horsepower or 800 horsepower. It does have 333 horsepower from factory, all thanks to a 6-cylinder supercharged engine. Now what does make this car fun is the fact that it's got a 6-speed manual transmission. So when you add a manual transmission to a supercharger, that is the perfect combination to have the most fun, because you have instant horsepower on any gear that you pick and choose to drive in. So let's do a quick recap on the manual transmissions. The very first one was built over 130 years ago in 1894, and it was chain driven. And the very first automatic transmission had 4 forward gears, no park or reverse, and it came out 25 years later after the manual transmission. And it also used air pressure instead of hydraulic fluid to shift those gears. Now some of you are going to say, well, if an automatic transmission came out over 100 years ago, why do we still have manual transmissions? Honestly, it's because it's taken this long to make an automatic transmission efficient. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's such a thing as parasitic losses. Basically, it takes so much things that have to happen in order to shift the gear in an automatic transmission. They lose some of that power, from the torque converter to the valve bodies and solenoids. There's just a whole process that has to happen, and a brain that sits on top of it, a transmission computer that tells that gear to be shifted. So there's a lot that actually goes into making an automatic transmission move. And now let's talk about what makes a manual transmission fun, and in order to do that, we got to get it on the road. So what makes manual transmission so much fun, right? Everybody's got their own story as to how they got into their first manual car. Mine was a 2016 Mustang GT that I went to a dealership and purchased, and I told them that I've had a manual car before, so they let me test drive it. I burned the living crap out of that clutch. By the time I got back to the dealership, I didn't think there was a clutch left. So I ended up buying that car and spent the whole weekend with my buddy who picked up the car from the dealership and drove it home for me. We spent the whole weekend learning how to drive it. So we put a Mustang, a V8 Mustang, and a manual transmission together. There was a lot that could have went wrong, but that was the way I learned it, in a V8 car. Now I may have been 23 years old by the time I learned how to drive a manual transmission, but it's always been on my bucket list of things to learn, and I'm proud to do it. So what makes a manual transmission so much fun? And quite honestly, it's because you're in full control of what the car is doing, right? I want to go 3rd gear right now from 5th, I can. I want to shift to 5th gear, you can do that as well. And now we're coasting. You have ultimate control of that car. And another thing that I love about manual transmissions that people kind of joke about, but it's kind of a good thing these days, you can't steal the car if you can't drive it away. It's #1 theft prevention, right? So when people see that it's got a manual transmission in it, they're not going to mess with your car. They're going to leave it alone. Now another thing about automatic transmissions, and yes, I keep bringing up Hellcats because I've had a lot of those, is anytime you want to raise a horsepower in a vehicle, when you do an engine tune, you are also recommended to do a transmission tune to adjust the pressure in the valve bodies and how it holds that gear, to make sure that you don't blow that transmission and it lasts you a little bit longer. Now in the manual transmission, you are the tune, and it's up to you how fast you can shift those gears and press that men pedal. Now what's absolutely sad is the statistics on how many different makes and models there is that actually carry a manual transmission as an option. In 2019, there were over 60 different models that you can choose to have a manual transmission. You can have a Fiat with a manual transmission, Porsches have manual transmissions, even like Honda Fits had manual transmissions. In 2023, there was only 40 different models that had a manual transmission as an option. That means almost 30% of them have disappeared in 4 years, and it's dropping quicker than that now. Unfortunately, that is the sad part of it. And did you know that when a vehicle has an option to purchase a manual transmission, only 2% are built with that manual transmission or requested to be built with the manual transmission? Hence why they are going away, because, well, it is a dying breed. And that leads us into talking about why the automatic is a better choice. First and foremost, if you're a car guy like me, if you love going fast and if you love cool cars, sports cars, this matters to you when it comes to shifting gears, right? Especially if you go to the drag strip and the track. On average, a person can shift a gear going forward, which means you're shifting from, let's say, second to third, fourth to fifth. Takes about half a second to a full second to do a gear. Now that means you really got to be dogging that car to do that, because, well, I'm not going to do it in this car. It's an all-wheel drive, and quite honestly, 140,000 miles, I'm not trying to break this car. And it takes 1 to 2 seconds to shift towards you. So that means first to second gear, third to fourth, and fifth to sixth gears, obviously, because it's more of an awkward position to do that. Automatic transmissions can shift a gear, especially in a dual clutch transmission like a Nissan GTR, within a tenth of a second, a tenth to 2/10 of a second, which means by the time you shift gear once, this thing can be going through into its third gear already. Now, I know a lot of people love the manual transmission at the drag strip. I get it. It's cool. It's super cool to watch, because think about how fast you got to be going to get a, let's say, a manual 6-speed transmission car to 7-second quarter mile, or even a 6-second quarter mile, where somebody just did in a Mustang. Think how fast you have to be shifting those gears to get up to 200 miles an hour in a quarter of a mile drag race. That is insane, but it's possible. In my opinion, the less I can involve myself into shifting gears, the quicker I can go at the track and less things can go wrong. Because imagine mis-shifting, and instead of going into, I don't know, fourth, you put into second, and then you completely destroy everything and obliterate that transmission. That probably costs $10 to $20 to $30,000 to build. Oh, by the way, you want more power out of your transmission? All you do is a tune in an automatic car. Now, if you're doing it in a manual, you gotta drop the transmission, you gotta do a better clutch pack, and that costs a lot of money, and you're down for a longer period of time. It is just a lot more work in order to push more horsepower out of a manual transmission vehicle. Now, for 90% of the world, and when they go to buy a car, to them performance is not the #1 option or reason to purchase a car, right? They want the technology. They want the newest and the latest, the lane departure warning, collision warning, adaptive cruise control, remote start, which honestly is a big deal for me too. Most manual cars, in fact, I think all the manual cars don't have remote start for a good reason. Most people, when they park their car, they leave it in first gear. Imagine just doing a remote start and the car just takes off across the parking lot, or smacks into your garage door, or hits another car. Also, another big reason why the automatics are taking over is because, well, back in the day, when you had a manual transmission, normally you would get better gas mileage, right? Because you can adjust and control what RPMs you're shifting gears, or your car shifting gears. So if you keep it below 2,000, 1,500, you're smooth sailing, you're not using a lot of fuel to get up to speed, you're just kind of cruising along. Fun fact, the automatic transmissions these days are able to self-learn. They're able to adapt to your driving habits. So if you have a heavy foot and you keep your RPMs at 3 to 4 to 5,000 in between shifts, it's going to do that as well, and your mileage is going to suck. If you're a cruiser and you love to take it easy on the road, you're going to get insane and incredible gas mileage. It's incredible how far the technology has come these days, that even if you have a V8 engine, you can still get 20, 25, 30 miles a gallon if you're a good driver. Now, I'll be honest, one turnoff for me for manual transmission has to be the fact that, well, you gotta be engaged, right? You can't take your hands off. I mean, you could if you're just cruising along, but if you're driving through city driving, you ain't touching this phone, because there's no time for it. You're not messing with the radio. You have to be focused on the road, which is a plus when it comes to safety, don't get me wrong, but we love our technology. We love the fact of being able to have all the creature comforts, hence why the Tesla has the full self-driving mode, so you don't have to do anything. It does it all for you. I've seen people that literally on the highway sleeping in the back or reading a book and not even paying attention. With the manual car, I'm probably sure the accident rates are probably a lot lower, or death rates for that matter, than anything else, because, well, like right there, if I wasn't paying attention, I would have smacked this U-Haul truck right in the back of it. I gotta say, this is not the fastest car I've ever been in, but it's one of the most fun cars that I've ever owned. Something about Audis and something about a manual transmission just makes the car a lot more fun. It's like one of those weekend cars that you always want to have in the stable, just for the fun days whenever you want to take it out, roll the windows down, and just really roll through those gears. I used to work at a Toyota dealership, and quite honestly, people still came and asked for Tacomas, manual Tacomas, which was extremely rare, so they would have to order one. Usually it was about only 3% of any Tacomas was made in the manual, but in the last, I would say, 6 months, I don't remember even a single person asking for them. And if we had one, used one on the lot, it would sit there for a very long time. It's sad to see it, but like I said, you can't steal it if you can't drive it. Overall, I think it's the fact that it's just a lot more hands-on experience whenever you have a manual car that makes it that much more fun and more memorable, because you remember the car, you remember going through gears, you remember shifting it, you just remember how the car felt. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you love the video, drop a like and subscribe, and comment down below which vehicle, which manual transmission car would you love to have back if you could find it again. I know you remember what it is, and I remember mine, and I wish I could find that Mustang, but it's probably somewhere in the ditch or wrapped around a tree. So I'll see you guys in the next episode.